welcome to another episode of Linked AfriCast, where we're here representing Linked Africa, where we empower Africans through connection, learning, and mentorship. I am Erin Kaba, and I am one of the hosts of this show, and here is my co-host. I'll allow him to introduce himself.
And of course, I am Ibrahim Lorik. This is Linked Africa, and there's no Linked Africa without your two hosts, Erin and Abraham. Always a pleasure to spend our time with you to share ideas. And today we are in for an interesting discussion. You don't want to miss this.
Yes, this discussion is going to be unlike our other discussions. It's going to be a little more open and vulnerable, I guess.
Yes.
More specific. And it's about effective communication. Now, we've talked about communication before, but we're going to talk about overcoming cultural differences. So here at Linked Africa, we are all from, like, the leadership, the board, and things like that. We're all from different countries and we represent different nations. So I was born and raised in the United States. I have ancestral cultural ties to Sierra Leone. I'm a citizen of Sierra Leone as well, but I was born and raised in the United States. So I'm American, African American through and through. And no matter where you work in life, whether you stay in the country of your origin or whether you branch out, even if you change locations within the same country, there's going to be some cultural differences that you're going to find. And I think overcoming them is a way to lead to your success, being able to overcome them. So let's go ahead and start this conversation. So Abraham, what role does culture play in communication in terms of, like, why is there a breakdown in communication sometimes across cultures?
Yes. So thank you so much. When we were putting this plan together, the whole of last 2 nights, I was just fascinated about the thoughts that even though we are one people, all of us in the world are one people, communication or the way we do things differ broadly across cultures. And that is why we cannot talk about communication without bringing in the factor of culture. And I believe culture has a very significant role in how we understand each other. Yes, so I am an African, true and true. I was born and raised in Ghana, and I traveled to the US just about 2-3 years ago. So how I was raised and how we communicate differs widely from how it is done here. I think what the role of culture in communication is that how people communicate in one culture may not be the same as how the other people communicate in their culture as well. So, for example, in Africa, communication has to do with people trying to, use proverbs, stories, for example, are all some form of cultural communication. But when I got here, I realized communication here is different. People are direct. They do not use proverbs. They don't use riddles. It's all direct. So one thought that I have for this particular question is that the role of culture in communication is that for Western culture, communication or meaning of your communication is speaker driven. The one speaking has to make their meaning very clear from the onset. But in Africa and some third world countries, the meaning of your communication is sometimes listener driven. When I say sometimes, I could even go a stretch to say in most times. So they would use riddles and expect you, the listener, to make meaning. They would use proverbs and expect you, the listener, to make meaning of it. Again, stories, for example, they tell stories to make a point and expect you to glean the lesson from the story to understand what the speaker is saying. So sometimes conveying meaning may come from the listener within African context. So when I got here, that was a little bit of a challenge because I was raised and I love using proverbs. I love using stories. I love that. But I had to adjust because that's the role of how culture is in terms of, the Western world. That's what I'll say for now. And as we move forward, maybe other thoughts will come in. But yes, I think culture has a very, very big stake in how we communicate and understand each other.
Most definitely. As you were talking, and it's not just how you speak, it's also like tone.
Mhm.
And it's also body language, because your
Mm,
body language can speak loudly, and
mm,
certain body language in certain countries mean one thing. So like for example, sometimes I watch like Bollywood or like certain shows from India, and I learned that in the United States, when we shake our head no, that means something totally different. There, it actually means yes, I believe.
yes,
So
yes,
it's
in
like,
India.
so it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's totally different. And I've worked and I've actually taught students from India, and it's like, trying to learn like their body language and things like that. So it's definitely, something that one needs to be aware of when
Mm,
communicating with people are not from the same country or region as you, because it can change regionally as well, because things like, I'm up north, I'm in the Washington DC area, there are some things down south in the country, like in Mississippi, that they do differently down there than up here. So we always have to be aware. And speaking of that, let's talk about some examples of cultural communication differences.
mm.
What are some examples? I'll let you go first.
Sure. I think this question is a very good build up on the first one that we already discussed. I would say we've already mentioned some of them, one of them being meaning. Meaning differs across board. So I may say one thing, and probably what I mean may be different from what the other person is picking up. Yes. So for example, let's say a father in a different culture saying something to their child, that same thing they said for that child to understand what they were saying may mean a different thing to a child in a different culture. And that's what we mean. You also made mention of body language, which is one of the best things that this evening people should pick from this. For example, in Africa, I keep speaking about Africa because that's where I was raised and that's where I came from. So it's easy for me to relate that for listeners to understand. And most of our listeners too would definitely be Africans generally. Now, political leaders, when they wave with the left hand, it's a problem.
Hmm.
But we know in Western culture, the queen could wave with the left hand and it's okay.
Mhm.
Presidents in the US could wave with the left hand. When they are getting down their plane, they could wave and it's still fine. But in Africa, it's rude to wave with the left hand. People would assume you are disrespecting them using your left hand to wave at them. What is wrong with your right hand? Because we assume the right hand is respectful. So if somebody who is a leader here is going to Africa and doesn't know about this body language difference in communication, it could translate to mean a different thing.
Mhm.
Another instance is even appearance when you are speaking, like again in body language. I remember Lionel Messi, the football player. Those of you who love soccer, you know Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi was invited to one of the African countries, I think it's either South Africa or Nigeria, to meet the president. I don't know what that discussion was about, but there's a video of what I'm talking about there. He went there in shorts and he greeted the president with a smile on his face. People were not concerned about how his body language of greeting and smiling. They were more concerned about his appearance when he got there. So sometimes these differences could create a lot of, gap between how people see you and how they understand what you are telling them. So I think these two are very, very important to talk about when we are mentioning examples of cultural communication differences, meaning you are conveying and sometimes the body language with which you are communicating. Very important.
Yes, definitely. I even think about the concept of time when it
Mhm.
comes to cultural communication.
Yeah.
Sometimes especially in the United States corporate world, even in the education world, everything seems to be urgent.
Yeah.
It's like,
A
hurry up,
fast-paced
hurry up,
economy.
very fast pace. Yes. So um even when you are showing up to work or showing up to, and it's something that somebody has invited you to, A lot of people here, they want you to show up on time. And especially to work, you got to be early, you got to be on time. You're not going to show up late. Or if somebody's asking you to do something, usually sometimes there's like a timeline attached to it. If I ask you to do it, I need you to do it now, or I need you to do it soon. And so other cultures that are not like that, sometimes that could be very off-putting, or it could be very confusing to, it's like, why is this so important? I'll get to it when I get to it. But the concept of time and urgency, I think, is another thing that will affect effective communication. And the other thing, I was thinking about it when you were talking, tone,
Oh,
informal tone and formal tone. A lot of people, I guess, especially like, so for example, I was a language teacher. So I have my bachelor's in Spanish education. So in Spanish, when you're speaking to someone who you don't know, or you're speaking to someone that has some type of authority over you, whether it be
mhm.
a parent, whether it be your boss, or just an adult, like someone older than you, you'll ask them a question in a specific way that you wouldn't ask that question to a friend. Like
Appear.
the words will change because
Yeah.
you're giving them respect and the tone is different. And so there's certain people here in the United States, sometimes our tone, we use the same tone for the same people,
Yeah.
and it could come across as disrespectful in
Yeah.
some circles, but it's not disrespectful. It's just the way that, people communicate.
Mm.
So I just wanted to add that.
Wonderful. That's a good thing to know. Yeah, because we know tone of voice is so crucial in communication. So yeah, definitely in our subsequent questions, probably we'll delve a little bit deeper into how tone of voice affects communication and meaning as a
Yeah,
whole.
definitely. I wanted to share a story. I think I have one or two stories where like communication barriers or misunderstanding has affected my work life, or has
Mhm.
affected my life, my personal life in general. Like I said, I was a language teacher. I taught Spanish for about 15-ish years, but during that time, there were some years where I taught the ESL class. So the kids who came to the school who didn't know English, I would help them with their English. So it was my first year of teaching my ESL class, and I loved it. Like, those were my favorite students. I shouldn't say I have favorite students, but those were my favorite students because they didn't know the language and they were new to the United States, and it was just a wonderful experience to teach them. However, I realized that I needed to get better at researching who I taught,
Yeah.
because I had this little boy, and he was from, well, not little boy, he was a teenager, but he was, young. Um, he was from somewhere either in the Middle East or India, one of the two. And I was talking to him, and he refused to look at me. And I took it as him being disrespectful. So I wasn't mean to him or anything, but I was like, "Hey, I'm talking to you." And I was trying to communicate with him in the amount of English that he knew. And a couple months after I started teaching him, I tried to like learn more about him, and I was so thankful that I didn't yell at him or blow up at him when he didn't look at me when I was speaking to him, because in
Mm.
his culture, it's considered disrespectful for you to look your teacher in their face when they're talking to you. So he always kept his head down, and he was showing me respect, but I was thinking that he was disrespecting me. And
Yeah.
there are some teachers that I taught with that didn't have that level of grace and compassion for their students. So like they, would be mad when he wouldn't look at them, when he talked to them, or when they talked to him. And so that definitely was a learning experience for me, because not only did I need to get to know the students just on a personal level so I could teach them. I needed to get to know who they were, like their background. Um, and even like you mentioned that in the United States, people are direct. I have had that, experience in my personal life. I have been in relationships with people who were from a different culture, and my directness was very different for them because they weren't used to that. And that's something that you work through, but it's definitely cultural differences can kind of make or break relationships. And it can
Wonderful.
make or break, your rapport that you have with your coworkers. Do you have any experiences, Abraham?
Yes, I'm so glad you shared that story, and I just wanted to say it was really good that you didn't take it on the child as being disrespectful, because I know in American culture it is considered right to look people in the eyes when they are talking to you, and that portrays confidence. In even some cases, if you are not staring somebody in the eyes when they are talking, you are considered to be not confident enough.
Mhm,
Yes, but that is totally different from most third world countries, Ghana included. And I'm sure, like you said, probably the boy might be from Asia or any other continent, and most of those continents too, looking people in authority in the eyes when they are talking to you is considered rude.
mhm,
When I first arrived here in 2022, I think it was somewhere in December that I had been here for 3 months, and we were having a college fair. So my supervisor, no, the director of the center, the learning center I was working at, was there present with me that day whilst I was trying to recruit students to our center and stuff like that. And whilst I was talking to them, she saw me looking the students in the eyes whilst I was talking and communicating. So when the students left and I sat down, I don't know whether it was a test, but she started talking to me and I wasn't looking in her eyes while she was talking. So she's like, I have noticed something about, and she had about 5 or 6 Africans working at the center. I don't
mm,
know, but she had this good rapport with African students, so she had a lot of us there. So Dr. Fallon, she's like, I've noticed something about African boys that I work with, or the African students that I work with. You people hardly look us in the eyes when we are talking to you. Why is that? And I had to explain to her that it is cultural difference. Our culture, when you are my director, so when you're talking to me and I'm staring you in the eyes, it's rude. But here it is different. And she's like, at the office, they have already concluded that all of us are shy. That all the African students are very shy. That's why we don't look people in the eyes when they are talking to them. And I said, no, it's not like that. She's like, I really appreciate you sharing this with me. Nobody has ever told me. And that could be probably because she has never asked them, or maybe she asked and they weren't able to really explain it that way to her. I don't know. But she said she never knew. And it was good I told her. But as I've been here for a while, I have to learn to adjust to the culture here and get to know here it is different.
mhm,
If I look you in the eyes when I'm talking to you, it doesn't mean I'm rude. But she caught that difference between me communicating with the students and communicating with her. And she was able to ask that intelligent question and found the answer. So I always say that it is good to ask a lot of questions, which probably might be one of the points that we'll be getting to. But truly, it was a learning process for me too. It means during my first 3 months, most of the work I was doing was appreciated, but they still considered me to be a shy person, which is not a bad quality, but sometimes it could be bad. It could be miscommunicated to be cowardice or whatever. I don't know how people would see it. So if you are an African out there, know that cultural differences can exist even in how we communicate with other people. And that was my experience here in the US.
Thank you for sharing. Wow,
Mhm.
that's interesting. So let's kind of, based on our experiences and experiences of others, what are some features of effective communication when it comes to building like across cultural gaps? Like, what are some effective ways to communicate in these situations?
First, I would say just learn about cultural differences in communication. Just learn. If you happen to be someone who works with people from different cultures, and we all do, I don't think now there's somebody who works solely with maybe one group of people. Definitely you come across others. And it's not just work alone. It could be even on the streets. It could be on the bus or the train or let's say your classroom. So it's good to learn how others communicate outside of your culture. Just expanding your knowledge about how communication cuts across other cultures would save you a lot of trouble. It will help you to be able to effectively communicate. Secondly, I would say you keep learning in terms of, experience, not just in books, but also whilst you communicate with people, check how they are communicating with you, how are they relating with what you are saying, and all of that. The third thing I would mention is ask a lot of questions. Okay, my boss, the director that I spoke about, got to understand how we communicate by just asking one question, one good question. You guys don't look at us in the eyes when we are talking to you. Why is that? Okay, so even though at the office they had already concluded we were shy, but she wanted to understand why are we shy or whatever the question was. But at least asking the question gave her an understanding of the fact that we are not shy, but our culture sometimes prohibits us to stare people in authority or elders in the eyes when we are talking to them. So asking questions is really good. One point that you raised, which I would like to share a stat about based on body language and tone of voice. Professor Murabian of the University of California conducted a research on cultural communication or communication across cultures. And he concluded that 55% of the message we send when we are communicating is contained in our body language. 55% of the message is contained in your body language. 38% is contained in your tone of voice, how you sound, and only 7% is contained in the actual words you use. So I would say, in terms of, good way of communicating across cultures, one of the best strategies is not to over concentrate on the words you are sharing. That is one point. Do not over concentrate on it, because sometimes the words, that is why it is very different to read the word stupid in a dictionary and to be called one. They are not the same. So sometimes just the tone alone means a different thing. So those are the stats. 55% is contained in your body language, 38% in your tone of voice, and only 7% is contained in the actual words you use.
That is some powerful, information, powerful statistics. You're like a walking encyclopedia or dictionary. You have all these statistics in your head. Wow, that's really good. I had to write that down. That's impactful. You really shared a lot of good information. I think I only have two things to share. The first for me is listening, actively listening to what people are saying. And listening is, listening to understand, not to respond or react, but listening to understand. And in this case, I feel like a part of listening is observing. So since you said what, 55% is body language?
Yes.
Okay, 55% is body language. How are you listening to their body? So a lot of times if I go into, and I've been in situations where I've been in different cultures, I've traveled a lot, and a lot of times I'll just sit and observe, and I'll try to look and see how people are acting and see what they do in certain situations so that I can know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. I actually learned that not the hard way, but I learned to observe my surroundings when I had gone to Argentina, and I went on a missions trip. And so we were always in church. And, I grew up in church. I knew how church was where I was from, but I failed to understand the processes and the rituals and things of church in another country. So I was in Argentina and we went to this church, and I wasn't really paying attention to what everybody was doing. And we were trying to find our seat. And I saw that there were some guys in my group who they sat on the stage, like where the men, where the preachers and things sit, they sat on the stage. And I went up there to sit with them because, we were all here as guests and everybody started reacting. They were like, no, no, Aaron, get down, get off the stage. I didn't know that women were not allowed to sit on the stage, just men. And there was a whole other section for women to sit. And I didn't know that. So unknowingly, it was kind of like disrespectful for me to even step foot on the stage where the men were, but I didn't know. And so I was embarrassed at that time because I didn't take the time to observe. If I actually paid attention, I would have realized that there are absolutely no women on this stage, and the women are to my left, but I wasn't paying attention. So I think that, that 55%, the body language and knowing what people are doing, you have to observe in knowing how to get over the, relate to people and be successful in each situation that you're in. The other item that I wanted to talk about is having conflict resolution skills because nobody is perfect and you don't know what you're going to encounter dealing with people from a different culture. You just don't know, and it's not your fault. Everybody is human, but having the ability to bounce back when mistakes are made, get up again, it's okay. Having the ability to say sorry, having the ability to explain, oh, in my culture, we do this. I'm sorry, next time I'll know this. So having those conflict resolution skills when times of tension and friction arise, I think are really good for overcoming cultural differences. Abraham, do you have anything else to add?
I think we've covered a lot, and I'm surprised. I'm quite surprised you've been to Argentina. It looks like you have a lot of experiences that I'm not aware of. Yeah, so that is something that I really need to sit down with you and you tell me other experiences you have. Erin has a lot to share, and I believe listeners have gotten a lot. One topic that I wish we may have to do an episode on, it just crossed my mind during our time with the mentees in this month during the summer program. Somebody brought up the idea that they wanted to be a public speaker and what are some thoughts for them. And I think that's a topic that if we could put it down and share with our listeners, it would be very good how to the skills for effective public speaking, even though it falls under communication, but I think it's a subject that could be handled differently. There are some pointers on that. So maybe listeners should just watch out for that. We'll plan an episode on that. And I think in our previous conversation too, we had questions from our previous conversation on communication. We had questions from some listeners on that. So definitely we are going to record an episode on that maybe in the future. But thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts on these topics. It was very impactful.
Thank you. This was great. I would love to do an episode on public speaking. And it would be nice if we could have a guest too on that episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Wisdom with us. But we are going to close out this episode. We had a great conversation. It was nice learning about you, Abraham. And we are going to go into our next episode here shortly. And I hope that you listen. And if you want to know more about Linked Africa, see us online. We are on LinkedIn. We are on, are we on Facebook? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, for the website, they can find us on www.linked.africa. Or you could also just type mentorship at linked.africa. Mentorship at linked.africa. Any of those two websites, you could find us on that.
Thank you so much and enjoy. Good night.
Good night.